All right, Kieran. So, where are you playing out of here for us today for the first call?
I am playing out of Harrah's Cherokee in North Carolina.
Okay, so you're playing at Cherokee in North Carolina, and what is the size of the game?
This is a 2-5 match the stack.
All right, so wow. Okay, so you've been playing less than a year, and you're already in a 2-5 match the stack. Okay.
Yes, quite a few members of the Discord actually pushed me pretty heavily to move up to the 2-5 stake, so I got really aggressive with that, and so I moved there pretty quickly.
So, what's your handle in Discord?
Booney?
Oh, okay, Booney. So 2-5 match the stack. Well, of course, at Crush Live Poker, we always encourage people to move up to the $5 blind level at live play. We even have a podcast about it by Michael G, who's in the live chat. And that's, of course, because it's just really hard to build a bankroll. I'm not going to say that you can't beat the micro stakes of live, but it's just very, very hard to actually save up money and whatever your goal is, possibly to move up, just because of rate considerations and drop considerations. I mean, you can see it from the casino's perspective in the sense that they charge the same amount pretty much across all levels, meaning that, they have to operate their building, they have to pay their dealers, pay their staff. So you're going to be paying the same sort of dollar amount pretty much per hand at like a $1-200 buy-in game as you are a 2-5 match stack game. So if you've got stacks of thousands of dollars and it's 2-5, you can see that the amount that they take out of each pot is exponentially lower as a percentage of total, sort of as a commission. That's why the low stakes are tough to kind of stay in. And to be honest with you, it depends on where you are. A lot of times 2-5 isn't even that big of a jump, but I mean, if it's the biggest game in the room, it can be challenging. If there's no 5-10 games, I mean, it can be a big difference between, say, like 1-2, but it's still, I would say, a fairly recreational level. Now, 2-5 match a stack. I mean, 2-5 in Texas played like a 10-20 game, so it wasn't traditionally like a 2-5 game. But that's why we always sort of push people to move up as quickly as possible. Okay, so 2-5 match a stack, and how deep are you?
I am 1800 effective with the villain.
Okay. 1800 effective. Okay, 2-5 match, 1800 effective. Any straddles or anything going on?
No straddles this hand. It is kind of worth noting that sometimes this game can play pretty big due to the straddle being up to 5 times the blind. So you can sometimes have straddles that are $25.
Right.
So the size of the game varies wildly. At this point in time, I believe during it was in the afternoonish. So the game was kind of more casual, even with it being nearly 2000 effective.
Yeah, and the thing about occasional straddles is that it doesn't play quite the same as if it's sort of a mandatory 3-blind game. People won't. What I have noticed is they don't get in the same. They don't make the adjustment of, okay, we're occasionally straddling to 10, so my $1,000 stack is really like the equivalent of 100 big blinds as opposed to 200. They just seem to get it in nittier with occasional straddling. Then when you start to fix the 3 straddle, then it really becomes sort of the regular game. But okay, so 2-5, 1800 effective. All right, so start us off here.
So it's going to fold around to the villain who is on the button.
All right.
And he is going to open to $25.
So 20, pretty, I mean, straight 5x.
Yep.
Is that about the standard in the game or?
Yeah, again, varies on the day.
Okay.
But 25 is pretty typical, 20 to 25.
All right, so button opens to 25.
Hero is in the big blind with Jack 10 of diamonds.
Okay.
And I 3-bet to $80.
3-bet to 80. And I mean, I think I would be mostly 3-betting this hand, even with no dead money in there against a button open. I think it's good enough to just play. I mean, definitely if the small blind called. I mean, that would even widen my squeezing range. But here, usually with 2 suited Broadway cards against a button open, it is a 5x open, but against a button open, I'm usually 3-betting. Now, a hand like Jack 10 suited, if the raise had come from early position and no one else had called, a lot of times you just call with the middling hands, but I don't have a problem with this at all. So 3-bet to 80 with Jack 10 of diamonds. Okay.
Right. And I think my sizing was a little small. I was kind of hesitant because this player, he had been there for about 3 orbits and he hasn't limped in any hands.
Okay.
And I think this was his first hand he's V-pipped since I've arrived at the table and he's arrived back from dinner. So I normally would go 100 here, but for some reason I went a little smaller.
Well, sometimes you can go smaller with a raise from a steal position because it's stealing, but then you are going to be out of position and you are sort of a deeper stack. So you usually do see a little bit more of a reflection of going a little bit larger from out of position. But then when you start, it's weird because then when you start to get like insanely deep, like say over, say 500 big blinds, some weird stuff happens where you want to keep the pot a little bit small from out of position. But okay, so you go to 80 and he calls.
Yep, he calls.
All right, so button calls. And now we're off to a pot of, I guess, like 160. We'll call it like about 160 bucks. Okay.
And then the flop is going to be the Jack of Clubs,
Uh-huh.
9 of Spades,
Okay.
8 of Clubs.
Jack of Clubs, 9 of Spades, 8 of Clubs. So so there is a front door flush draw out here with clubs. Hero has Jack 10 of Diamonds. So top pair, open-ended. Now, what I would say here is that just like right off the cuff, it wouldn't surprise me if your hand here is checked a lot, and it might even be, and again, you don't have to, I mean, I usually, from Crush Live Poker's perspective, especially at 2-5, I will usually advocate, it's one of our small stakes exploits, betting a larger volume of top pairs and over pairs on boards that sometimes will like favor the in position defender, whether it's a single raise pot or a 3-bet pot, where a lot of times maybe the theory might say, hey, this could be close to a check 100 on a board like this. You have Jack 10, so you can easily check call and, cross multiple streets with a check call with your top pair open-ended. You can certainly get value from worse here too. It's just not necessarily the best spot to bet and get raised. And your hand does have, a fair amount of equity, so it's not a great spot. That's the whole thing. Like theoretically, you're not really supposed to take a whole lot of hands and bet fold them on the flop. The ones that you are in between are checked. That's the theory. But against a lot of people at this level that aren't making moves and that under bluff, that bluff far like less frequently than they're supposed to, I will often take a bet more than I'm supposed to type of line on a certain board. I do kind of feel like that I might check here though a lot because I think it might be a board that gets stabbed a fair amount here too. I mean, it is a late position open, so he does have a lot of hands. So you could make a case here for just betting straight for value. But I don't hate a check. I think this would be a mix here from me.
Okay, and if you, I did end up betting $50 here.
Okay, so Hero bets 50. So Hero bets $50 on this board. And it's interesting because, I mean, when you can bet a lot of hands for the smaller sizing for sure. And sometimes when you start to like bet larger sizings, you tend to polarize yourself to something very strong or very weak. Jack 10 might sort of be in between here. So you bet 50 into 160, okay.
And the button will call.
All right, so button calls. I mean, he's going to be calling here with a lot of stuff.
Would you have gone a different size if you were to bet here?
I think I might have taken the check or when I bet larger type of line of 2/3. I mean, again, it's pretty. I mean, you're probably not giving up all that much, but I think if you're going to bet with an overpair that unblocks a Jack X, if I were to bet, I would bet the 2/3 sizing. Here you block top pair, but there is still a lot of stuff here that can call you. I wouldn't really expect to see a whole lot of under pairs here defend unless maybe they've got. See, you might with the small sizing get a hand like sixes with the 6 of clubs to continue on. Where if you had bet like 2/3, maybe not something like that. But okay, so the pot's $260.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The turn is going to be the 8 of hearts.
All right, so the turn is the 8 of hearts. So it's Jack of clubs, 9 of spades, 8 of clubs. Turns the 8 of hearts, Hero with Jack 10 of diamonds here. And this is certainly a card that could trip him up here a little bit. I mean, he's definitely going to be calling with all 8x for sure that gets this way here on the flop, past the flop because you bet so small on the flop. So I could see checking here.
Okay, and I do check.
All right. I could also see betting here too. Again, it's a little bit of a mix. Again, I would say I would tend to, like, the more straightforward the player is, the more I might lean towards betting. Like, just bet, and then possibly check. Just because Jack 10, you've got the absolute worst Jack, so it's really hard to get 3 streets here, specifically with Jack 10. But if you had something like aces or kings, you might be able to do that against a Jack. But okay, so hero checks on the 8 of hearts.
And the button checks back.
All right, so button checks behind. I would tend to say that in the button's perspective, he's going to be betting here with a fair amount of Jack X, I would say, for protection, as he should. And he should be betting trip 8s here. So I think that you have the best hand here a fair amount. I mean, and also too, like, you took the small sizing on the flop, so a lot of some of the light floats, I think, need to start bluffing here on the turn, like a king, queen, something like that. He should be betting 8x. He probably should be betting a lot of these Jack X for protection. I mean, he might even be betting 9x here. He could have like ace high here and just be checking it through, something that has slivers of like a little bit of showdown value that doesn't necessarily need to bluff. I feel like if I was in his spot and I had like ace 9 here, I'd be doing a lot of betting after you go 1/3. I might bet 1/3 in position and then just shut it down, just check it back at the end. We don't know what this guy's doing, but it's a late configuration where the ranges are pretty wide. So the pot remains $260. Okay. Yep.
The river is the Jack of Hearts.
All right. So the river's the Jack of Hearts. So now you have a situation where it's a good card for you. I mean, not only is it a good card for you in the sense that, like, if somehow you were ever losing, you're beating him. Now you chop with other jacks. You beat a straight. Not that that's, if he was somehow like slow playing, like 9s full, you beat that too here. And now you might get called by ace high. You know, I kind of tended to think that he didn't probably have much Jack X. And now I definitely think that's the case. When another Jack comes, when he doesn't bet turn, probably doesn't have much 8x, probably doesn't even have that much 9x. Something that had slivers of showdown value. Because you could look at this and you could take a line where you'd be like, oh, well, I want to check here and possibly induce a bluff, maybe from front door clubs or king, queen. Again, I tend to think a lot of those hands bet off on the turn when you go 1/3 in calls. A lot of those hands want to bluff. So I think this kind of lends him towards having something that's not that strong, but worthy of him thinking that it had enough showdown value to check back the turn. So I might come out and make like a sort of a smallish type of bet to try to get called by ace high. And I mean, the other thing too is that you have a situation where his small pairs get counterfeit. So like something like 5s or 6s, like if you were to check, those hands might, turn themselves into bluffs because they don't have any showdown value. But if you kind of block the river here, I'm saying block like something like 75, 80, you might even induce something here from those small hands. So I don't think a big bet here is ever really warranted when he just doesn't have much Jack or 8x here. I think that a big bet would probably not be the play, I would say, unless somehow like you think a big bet's going to get called by ace high. So I'm kind of thinking like maybe something like 80, something like that. Again, the board is Jack 9, 8 Jack.
Right. I did end up going with a fairly large size, thinking I could get called down potentially by some kind of ace high, or maybe even some slow play like over pairs, or that were just being very passive, and that just called on the pre-flop in position, which I think is unlikely to think that like pocket queens or kings might be here, but it also wouldn't surprise me. So I thought I could get some good value here, so I ended up betting $200.
But don't you think most of those hands are going to bet the turn though?
I would think so. However, if he's passive enough to just call with those pre-flop, they also might be passive enough to check back the turn potentially.
I mean, again, the issue that I have with this bet is that I don't know if it's going to get called by ace high as much. And now I don't think that those types of holdings that are get counterfeit with the small pairs, once you take the sizing, I don't think they're going to have the guts to maybe turn them into a bluff, as opposed to if you put a smaller bet out where you might actually induce something. I mean, that's kind of how I look at this one.
I think that's fair.
So you bet 200, okay.
And then the button is going to raise to 500.
Wow. The button raises to 500. This is kind of why I also like to pick this hand here. And this might be pretty, I mean, this is actually a very good, I would say it's a good hand for people that might not be all that experienced. Now, you find yourself here, Kieran, playing a pretty big game. Like, you've only played for 8 or 10 months. So, and sometimes like at the smaller stakes, maybe even at this stake, people would look at this and they'd be like, oh my God, I've got top full house here. Why would I ever not just re-raise? And the reason why you would not 3-bet and just call, and I feel strongly about this, is because, first of all, there are some hands that you lose to. You are losing to Jack 9. You have to point that out. Whenever the board is double paired and you have top full house and there's a higher card out there, in this case a 9, where someone else could have Jack 9 or Jack X, like say the river was like a king or something like that, and then you could lose to King Jack. You'd also lose to pocket kings. But in this case, you lose to Jack 9. So that's one specific hand that you lose to. You also lose to quad 8s. It's not just that, though. It's the fact that you lose to some hands and you will never get the same hand to fold. So when you're in a situation where you lose to some hands and you can never get the same hand to fold, then it has to be just a call. I would say, with the one caveat where if there was somehow a hand that was worse than yours that could call you. But I just don't see that the way that this one went down. So what are the hands that are worse than yours that are quote unquote strong on this board that are boats? An 8, which I don't think is going to really play this way or raise, and certainly shouldn't be calling a bet 3-bet. And I suppose like pocket 9s, but that's almost like the equivalent of an 8. I mean, pocket 9s might check through the turn a bunch as a slow play, where an 8 won't. But I don't even think that 9 is going to be raising here on a double paired board, and certainly should never be calling like a bet 3-bet all in. So those two things coupled together, where you lose to some hands and you can just never get the same hand to fold, just always has to make this a call. Unless you're up against some absolute drooler. Because remember, say he has some like counterfeit bluffs, like pocket 6s. There's no value in raising back against those either, right?
Right.
So this has to be a call.
Right. And in the moment, I didn't give it much thought. It ended up being just a snap call.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of the topic of the day in the Discord, was situations like this where if I jam, am I ever getting called by worse?
By the way, somebody had asked me too. Someone asked in the live chat, what would I do with Jack 9? If I had Jack 9 here, Kieran, and I were you, yeah, I would just be jamming all day here. Because if you have Jack 9 now, sure, you lose to pocket 8s, which is one specific combo. But there are, I guess there would be, I suppose you could make a case that there would only be one other Jack 9 suited that's available. I guess if it's just 1 and 1, I suppose you could make a case that there wouldn't be value, but actually, what am I talking about? Like any other Jack, I'm sorry, take that back. My mind is melt. If you had Jack 9 here, you beat any other Jack. So he doesn't just have to have suited Jacks here. You beat Queen Jack, you beat King Jack, you beat Ace Jack. There's multiple combinations of Jack X that you beat with Jack 9, and you're only losing to quad 8s. So you have to jam or whatever, bet 3-bet. If I bet 200 and the button raised me to 500 and I had Jack 9, this would be a jam all day long. Because there's just for the same reasons like this has to be a call, you're never going to get, a Jack's never going to fold. So you have to bet 3-bet with Jack 9, but here this is just a call. So button raises to 500 and you call. Okay, and you're saying that, I didn't mean to cut you off, that you didn't really think about it that much?
Yeah, because once I saw the river, I was pretty confident I had the best hand here the majority of the time. Because I actually discounted all Jack 9 combos because there was no suited combos left. So I was pretty confident it was either I lose to quads or I chop with another Jack. And so,
but even if there's still no Jack 9 combos left, though, Jack 9 suited combos because of the suit of your Jack and the suit of the 9, right? There is none because clubs, spades, hearts are on the board and you have a diamond. That doesn't matter. There's still one combo of 8-8. And if they're never going to fold a Jack, then it just doesn't make any sense. Now, if you start to add something where you say that, okay, well, I can get a Jack to fold some of the time, that changes things. That's just not going to happen. I feel you're not even that deep, to be honest with you. So that's why it's just a call. So you make the call. Okay.
I call, and the button has pocket nines.
So button, wow, that's pretty surprising. Button has pocket nines. Let me ask you this question, though. So button has 9-9. You bet 200, button raises to 500. Let's say that you make it like 1100. Is he going to call with 9-9? Now, he might actually call. It's really close just because, but I mean, if he's any type of player, but the reason why though, that this isn't even a bet, 3-bet, like targeting 9-9 is because how often does 9-9 raise the river here?
Right.
Like
I completely discounted 9-9.
Yeah, like 9-9 is the equivalent to an 8. They're the same hand. So the only difference between 9-9 and an 8 is from his perspective, he beats an 8. Like if you somehow had ace 8 here, he beats that. But that's just, again, that's really, really going into the weeds. So I'm actually really surprised here that he even has 9-9. And if you were to say, hey, Bart, like how often does 9-9, if the guy got here with 9-9, how often is he raising the river? I would even say that often. And then let's say he raises the river like 30% of the time, which I think is really high. Then how often he's going to have to call your 3-bet with 9-9. So again, it is that one hand where you can get value from, but I don't think you did anything wrong.
Cool. Sounds good.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it.